Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Today on the program, both the Philippines and China agree it's about time to put an end to the Recto Bank issue.
Ang i-decide mo lang naman, aksidente ba o sinadya?
After Beijing rejects a third party to investigate the Maritime incident.
At sabi naman nila, huwag na yung third party, kailangan tayo lang mag-usap doon.
Also without documentation, is a verbal fishing deal with China legally binding?
The moment we enter into that kind of arrangement, it's very hard for us to assert our rights of West Philippine Sea.
The House Speakership race heats up with the presidential son and Davao lawmaker announcing his possible bid for the post.
Pwede rin magbago ang isip ng presidente, pwede rin magbago ang isip si Congressman Karlo Duterte.
And 3 years into the Duterte administration, can Filipinos feel real positive change? Cabinet Secretary Karlo Nograles joins us live. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pinky Webb. President Rodrigo Duterte will ask for Chinese President Xi Jinping's assurance that Filipino fishermen will be protected in the West Philippine Sea following the incident where a Chinese vessel rammed a Filipino fishing boat and abandoned 22 Filipino fishermen in open sea. Malacanang says the president will raise this issue in his next bilateral meetings with China. Also, the House Speakership drama is far from over, with the presidential son and Davao Representative Paulo Duterte announcing his intent to join the race. Let's go straight to the source of this story. We have Cabinet Secretary Karlo Nograles. Secretary, good to see you. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Pinky. Thanks for having me.
You're always welcome. Let's start with an agreement. What do you know about the agreement? Here, let me state the facts because it's an ever-evolving issue.
Okay.
So what is clear now, at least to me, was that back in 2016, President Xi Jinping, President Rodrigo Duterte had a verbal agreement on this fishing agreement in the West Philippine Sea.
Oh, well, like you said, it's a verbal agreement, and we know in diplomatic parlance, a verbal agreement is, if it's not formalized and in writing, then it's just an agreement to come into an agreement. So basically, that's where we are. That's where it is right now.
So if it's an agreement to come into an agreement, does that mean it's a national policy?
It means that the lines of communication are open. We'll continue to discuss, we'll continue the bilateral discussions on this. If it's not formalized, then we'll just continue to talk. But the bottom line is, I think the overarching message is that we want peace, we want good relations, we want to continue the talks, we want to be good neighbors, and so that is the overarching message in that verbal talks that they've had.
But it means what to you? It means that China can fish in the Philippines exclusive economic zone.
It means
China can fish in Recto Bank.
It means that let's talk. Let's continue to talk about this. But meaning to say, if the details of this, if this comes into a treaty, if this comes into a joint venture agreement, what are the parameters of fishing?
Wala pa tayo doon.
Wala pa tayo doon.
Yeah, so in the
Wala pa tayo
meantime,
doon.
if our fishermen see Chinese fishermen in the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, it just tells them that pinayagan niya ni Pangulo. Tama ho ba yun?
No naman. Kasi syempre, like right now, we stick to the position that it belongs to our exclusive economic zone. So therefore, tayo dapat may exclusive rights tayo dun. We exercise our sovereign rights over that, which means exploitation, exploration,
Enjoyment
of those resources.
But they're allowed. They are allowed to fish. I mean, that's really what we need to find out.
I think
Can they
Secretary Locsin gave this statement na if when it comes to fish, syempre, meron yan surplus, di ba? So yung surplus na yan, pwede sa ibang bansa if there's surplus. So those details. Now, how do you determine surplus? What is surplus? So those are details that have to be worked out.
And
And
so-
that's why meron tayong mga bilateral meetings. In fact, we already have this mechanism between China, the BCM, the Bilateral Consultative Mechanism. And so that's in play right now. And then the president is stating that he will raise,
Okay.
he may raise this issue in a bilateral
Right,
meeting.
he may.
So before that, we go to that, then that mechanism is in play. And then that mechanism is in play, but over and above that, meron din tayong mga tinatawag na informal talks
Yeah.
between DFA and the counterpart dun sa China.
Yeah.
So all of these things that are not really publicized are happening on the in the
Yeah,
background.
there's something, there are agreements, there are talks evolving
And these are all verbal.
on the back end.
These are all verbal.
Right.
These are all verbal. And that's why dito sa realm ng verbal, meron tayong tinatawag. That's why it's verbal, because para open ang lines of communication. But once that's translated to formal written documents, dyan na.
That's another story.
That's another story.
Yeah.
But right now, we have to understand that we have to allow verbal agreements, verbal talks to happen and proceed so that lines of communication are open.
Okay, so it's a verbal agreement between the two presidents, but it still doesn't answer my question. Are they allowed, are foreigners allowed, are the Chinese allowed to fish in the Philippines exclusive economic zone? That's what I need to know, sir.
Let's put it this way. The policy still is, it's our exclusive right. We will stick to that policy. Now, adjustments between good neighbors will probably be made through bilateral talks. Kasi syempre, sila din, sinasabi na, paano naman, we
Yung
also
mga
consider
Pilipino.
that, they might also say, but we consider that as also part of our economic zone or whatever you want to call it, di ba?
Their nine-dash line.
Whatever they want to call it, tayo, meron tayong sinasabi, hindi, it's our EEZ. So there is clearly an overlap. In their mind, there's an overlap. In our mind, no, it's ours. So we stick to that policy. We never let go of that policy. We never let go of our sovereign rights over the exclusive
Which
economic
is
zone.
part of the Constitution, Section 2, Article 12 of the Constitution, which actually states that the state shall provide or protect the nation's marine wealth in its archipelagic waters, territorial sea, and exclusive economic zone, and reserve its use and enjoyment exclusively to Filipino citizens.
Correct.
So
And
you're
we stick
saying
by
we
that.
stick by this. This still takes precedence over anything.
Yes.
Pero kapag nakita po sila sa exclusive economic zone ng Pilipinas, sir, what is Malacanang sa bawal ho ba sila doon or hindi?
Siyempre, the Philippine Coast Guard, if they would see something like that, then they're bound to enforce the law. And we have the fisheries code, we have the fisheries law, so they will be bound by their duty to enforce the law.
Which is?
Atin yan, bawal yan.
So, ibig ho ba sabihin nun, paaalisin sila?
I think if
Or is
they
that
stick
clear,
by their
sir?
duty,
Or
if
is that
they
not
stick
clear
by their
yet?
duty, they have to enforce it, right? At pag in-enforce nila yan, then the president will stand by them.
The Coast Guard, if
Siyempre,
they enforce
of course.
that. Okay, so it's not a national policy because that's also one of the questions, sir, being raised. If it's a verbal agreement, it's not. Is it or is it not a national policy?
Like I said, it's an agreement to agree. Let's continue to talk. Let's find some sort of
Compromise.
win-win solution here.
Okay.
Let's find a solution where we're all good neighbors here. Diba? So, explore mo yung lahat ng possibilities, lahat ng realms. Whether or not the policy has been defined, not yet. Because, like I said, it's an agreement to just, itong message. Ang message is, let's be good neighbors. Let's find a way to share the resources, maybe, or paano ba ito, if you're there and I'm there, how do we do this?
So we're still constantly on talks, basically,
And
sir.
which is the best way to do this thing? I think we should just really talk.
Okay, until when?
Until we come to something that is acceptable to both parties. That's yan ang foreign relations. That's why we leave it to the DFA to take the lead in this. In the meantime, we'll have to enforce whatever we can enforce based
Under
on
the
our law,
Constitution.
under the Constitution.
Sir, do you have a copy of the report coming from, there is the Marina, there's the Coast Guard. that they pass this over to Secretary Tugada and eventually to Malacanang, sir.
Yes. The President has a copy already.
Can you tell us what
I
you
have
know
not
about
seen
it?
the copy.
Oh, you haven't
I
seen
think ES has a copy.
it? Have you heard about it? Do you know what's in the findings, sir?
No, I don't know. I don't know. But in the cabinet meeting, parang may nasilip ako kay ES na... na may
Pakikwento ko ano yun.
Hindi, yung ano
Siglit
lang,
mo.
nakita ko lang yung front page eh. Hindi ko nakita yung laman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did the front page say, sir?
No, I think it's the summary, the findings.
When is Malacanang going to make this public? Because parang I remember the president saying, sir, that they're formally writing it in a sense, sir, and then this will be presented to the public. Is that still...
In due time. In due time. Kasi syempre, it has to have a process. Right now kasi, we don't want to preempt anything. Of course, ang findings natin are our findings. Hindi pa natin alam anong findings ng China. Diba? So, it may be premature to show the public na ito yung findings natin because makikipag-usap pa tayo sa China. What we want to avoid is having people think or perceive na ito na yun. When it isn't. Well, according to our story, it is. But what about the story of the other side? Makikipag-usap pa tayo sa kanila. So, ito, like I said, this is diplomatic. This is diplomacy in action, in fact. Because they have their side of the story and we have our side. So, anong side nila? So, magkakaroon tayo ng compare notes.
So let me ask you
We will
this,
compare our
Secretary.
notes, our findings with their findings. And in order to enforce something, when it comes to two countries, both countries have to agree. If one country doesn't agree, mahirapan rin tayo sa enforcement. That's the reality on the ground. That is the reality of international diplomatic relations.
Secretary, if our finding is different from that of China, what happens? Because China already said they don't want a third party.
Yeah.
Papayag lang ho ba tayo ng gano'n na ayaw nila
Yeah,
ng
ang
third
mangyayari
party?
kasi niyan, syempre, we'll be comparing notes. Ito yung amin, ito yung inyo, anong acceptable, ganyan. And then siguro, by that time, sabay na natin ilalabas.
Is that the plan?
I think so. Ayokong pangunahan ng DFA on this. Again, they take the lead. But I would think that would be the best course of action. Because if pangunahan natin, ang mangyayari niyan, I'll show my findings on my national TV. China will show their findings on their national TV. How do we communicate now? How do we now... So their countrymen will say, hindi, itong findings namin. And we'll say, hindi, itong aming findings. It's not healthy.
Are we afraid that the findings might differ, sir?
I don't know. That's speculative. We don't know what their findings will be. Baka magkaroon tayo ng common findings. Unless we show notes, unless we compare notes, we'll never know what the other side is. That's why, very delicate ito. It's not as easy as, doing this and doing that. There are protocols in diplomacy. And these protocols have been set because of the history of diplomatic relations, not necessarily with the Philippines and China, but with other countries as well. So over the years, over the course of history, we've come into some sort of protocol and procedure that we follow because somehow these, based on past experiences.
But what is Malacanang's stand on China not wanting a third party here?
Like I said, it was a suggestion. And that suggestion is something open to discussion. And if they're uncomfortable with a third party, then we can work with that. I think DFA can work with that.
What you're saying is we are okay that there is no third party, just to be clear on that, sir.
I think so. I think DFA Secretary Locsin has said that he's open to just two parties talking.
We'll be taking a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Cabinet Secretary Karlo Nograles. Sir, let's talks about a possible impeachment. Although you even have now minority senators saying malabo tong talks of impeachment because this verbal agreement. Verbal nga daw. You can't even use this in court because you can't use newspaper reports either because that would be hearsay according to Senator Frank Drilon.
Yeah.
So,
Manipis, sobrang nipis. It's nothing. Well, if that's the basis for the impeachment, remember, sa impeachment proceedings, it passes to the House of Representatives first. No? And there's a determination of form, then there's determination of substance. After that, meron ka pang determination of sufficient grounds. After determination of sufficient grounds, meron ka pang determination of probable cause. Then after that, you have to go through the hurdle of 1/3 members of the House. 5 steps ka dyan. So if
Saan
it
pa
all-
lang dun sa 5 steps, wala na, sir, for you?
baka form and substance, dead na. If like ganyan, if verbal agreement and you're saying newspaper reports, form and substance. First 2 steps, baka dead na yan.
So I wonder why, if that is the case, sir, as I mentioned, even opposition senators, well, Frank Drilon was saying, mukhang malabo din talaga to. Why would the president threaten people who possibly want to impeach him to be jailed?
I think the
He looked really serious and angry.
I think the context has to be clear because when that question was asked, there were a series of questions before that. And I think the series of questions before that were leading to forcing his hand to do something that might lead to war. So if it is under that context na they're forcing him under the threat of impeachment, yung threat, which whatever it is, grave threats, veiled threats, the threat itself, the act of threatening the president, may be construed as a crime.
Which is what?
What? Kung grave threats nga, pwedeng, di ba?
What is the
Vice
crime?
Penal Code. Yung the act of threatening
The president.
Because
But
if
has
impeachment...
anyone threatened the president?
No, yun ang sinasabi niya. Ang sinasabi niya lang, if you force my hand here, if people try to force my hand here with impeachment or et cetera, I think under that context, what he's saying is that can be construed as a crime. But don't threaten him with things that would lead the country to war. That's basically his point. His point is, alam nyo, kung magkakagera tayo dito, dahil dito, at ganito, tapos iti-threaten nyo pa ako, magkakaproblema tayo, then I think under that context, yung sinasabi niya, then I will jail you.
Okay, so...
Because it might go now into the realm of, crimes against the state na yan. Di ba?
So what you're
Sedition.
trying to say is...
Inciting to sedition.
Inciting to sedition, sir.
All these things.
Ang sinasabi niyo ho kasi, hindi naman, if somebody wants to impeach him, just to be clear,
Yeah.
hindi naman ibig sabihin na ikukulong yun ni Pangulo.
Hindi, and I think Senator Bongo spoke about this already. And he said impeachment itself is not a crime. Of course, you file your impeachment. Of course, that's part of the Constitution. It's part of remedies under the law. Diba? So you can impeach, sure, but yung tinetreaten mo na yung Pangulo na parang inciting to sedition na and all of these things.
Doon, papasok yun.
Papasok na yun.
All right, because when they talk about impeachment, sir, again, that's under Section 2, Article 12, saying that we need to protect our exclusive economic zone. That's one thing, sir. And sinasabi nga posibleng the president could be liable for betrayal of public trust and culpable violation of the
I
Constitution.
will not comment on that because kung sino man complainant,
Go ahead.
whatever, do your thing.
Okay, let's talk about what's happening first in the House before we go to the President's 3 years, sir. You, obviously, a member of the House quite some time, your father as well, your brother as well, sir. What is happening? Now you have Congressman Paulo Duterte saying he is looking or possibly wants to join the speakership race, and you have the President already saying, if he does this, I'm resigning.
Well, I think, to be clear, it's party dynamics in play here, di ba? So, syempre, PDP Laban is the ruling party, and then you have major parties like Nationalista, you have NPC, di ba? Paulo belongs to a local party called Hugpong ng Taong Lungsod, then Hugpong ng Pagbabago also has 3 members. So, it's just really party dynamics. Because, essentially, syempre, the ruling party would wanna be the one to have the speaker kasi they're the most. PDP Laban has how
80
many?
plus.
80 plus. Diba? So, Nationalista is also parang second place. So, they have Alan Peter Cayetano naman. So, these are just party dynamics that hopefully in the days and weeks to come will become clearer and clearer kung sino na ba talaga yung maging frontrunner dito.
Yeah, but have you seen the House, so many congressmen vying for the speakership?
Well, it's unusual, no? It's unusual, but that's not to say it's impossible or it's actually happening right now.
But it's never
So
happened in the past.
parang each and every party now are parang lifting their banners and saying, pwede rin ito, pwede rin yan.
And what
pwede
is it?
rin."
Is it, honestly, sir, is it just really posturing?
I don't know. I don't know what the intent is, what the agenda is, but certainly, parang everybody's, well, not I mean everybody, but certain candidates want to be the leader of the
Yeah.
House. They think that they can do a good job as a speaker. They can push the president's legislative agenda, push the administration's legislative agenda. By all intents and purposes, they're all allies of the president.
Do you think Congressman Paulo Duterte is serious about wanting to possibly become speaker?
It would be Paolo who you should ask. He would be the
I know,
best.
it would be
He the
speculative
best.
on your
Yeah,
end.
oo naman.
Pero kilala mo naman siya, di ba? Okay, let me ask you this. The president said he would resign if his son becomes speaker. Will the president still do that in the event?
I think when the president says something, I think he will do it. But and even Senator Bongo said the same thing yesterday. But whether or not Paolo's going to run or not, again, it's really between Paolo and the father. Pagdating dun, these are family matters already. And when it comes to family matters, then we leave family matters to members of the family.
We'll be taking a short break. This is the Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Cabinet Secretary Karlo Nograles. Sir, cabinet meeting, Secretary Piñol was there. This happened last Monday, right?
Monday,
So
yes.
that means hindi pa tinatanggap yung kanyang resignation?
Hindi
Okay.
pa. So he's still Secretary of Agriculture.
Okay.
And we have a new secretary, Secretary Honasan.
Oh, that's right, of course, of the DICT,
He attended
right.
his first cabinet meeting Monday.
Yeah.
So welcome to the cabinet.
The Duterte administration. Sir, is there a looming revamp? Are there people that will be changed? There's talk about certain people possibly coming in and leaving.
You know what, to be honest, I'm hearing the talk. I'm hearing these rumors. But to be honest, kami sa loob ng gabinete, we really don't know if it's true or not. To be honest, it just happens. It just happens. There's no warning.
Ang may alam lang
May
sino,
chismis
si
lang, just
Pangulo,
here.
si ES, tsaka si Senator Bongo. Sila yung siguro first.
Siguro, malamang. They would know.
NEDA stays as NEDA, ganun ba?
I really don't know. These
DFA stays as DFA, sir?
I really don't know. No, I'm being honest here. I'm brutally honest. We serve at the pleasure of the president. We don't really know. It just happens.
Let's go to the SONA, sir. What are the priorities of the president? They say, of course, the last 3 years will be very vital.
Yeah.
Ano ho bang
Well,
prioridad?
as far as the legislative agenda is concerned, we've got the Land Use Act, right-sizing, budget reform, the coconut levy, Department of Disaster Resilience, mandatory ROTC, FOI, amendments to the human security, mainly strengthening the anti-terrorism law, and pension reform for uniformed personnel. These are just some of the legislative priorities of the president this coming administration, this coming new Congress. As far as what we want to focus on this next 3 years is the anti-poverty. This is where malasakit comes in. The president promised tapang at malasakit. As far as tapang is concerned, I think we've been able to establish peace and order. And the first 3 years, we've been very good at that, at establishing peace and order. And so now the next 3 years will be focused more on the anti-poverty, poverty reduction. And we're very happy with the numbers. Self-rated poverty is its all-time low. All poverty indicators are at its all-time low, and we just want to continue and push and accelerate that. So, yun ang magiging focus ng...
Federalism is out of the picture for now, sir?
No, there's still a task force on federalism, and we'll continue to do the work. But ultimately, it will depend on Congress. And when I say Congress, it really means the House and the Senate. It may go very fast in the House, and then it will be stuck in the Senate.
And so you're talking about separately?
Sorry. Yes.
The House and the Senate separately?
Well, they have to, well, again, realm of the legislative branch na yan, so we'll leave it to the leaders of those both houses to talk and discuss and come out to a final game plan.
Tell us what would be the biggest gain of the Duterte administration the past 3 years, sir?
The past 3 years, if you look at what we've done, free education, free irrigation, universal health care, institutionalizing the 4 Ps, anti-drugs campaign, peace and order, and this is why we're doing the pre-SONA also. We're doing pre-SONAs, by the way. We started on Monday.
Yeah.
We'll do one in
With
Cebu.
the economic managers,
With the
right?
economic
Yeah.
managers. Then on Tuesday, on July 10, we'll do it in Cebu. We'll talk about poverty reduction
Who's
there.
that, sir, sa Cebu on Tuesday?
So
Neda.
Wednesday, so July 10, that would be Secretary Bautista of the SWD, OIC Secretary Abuel of DBM, and Secretary Anyo of the ILG. Then on Monday, July 17, we'll talk about climate change and security, justice, and peace.
Before we go, sir, you were talking about highlighting the peace and order situation here in the country as a gain of the Duterte administration. Is the president at all or Malacanang concerned about this supposed suicide bombings or possible suicide bombings?
We're concerned about that. We obviously want to put a stop to that. That's something that we don't want to see happening again. We're very serious about that. And I'm very confident that the AFP, the military, and the intelligence community are doing its best.
To Cabinet Secretary Karlo Nograles, sir, maraming salamat po sa'yo. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.